The HOA's final warning letter arrived with the precision of a sniper's bullet, crisp paper, crimson ink, and a threat that would have made most people fold. But I'm a disability rights lawyer, and my service dog, Atlas, was the only thing keeping me upright after the accident.
This is a formal warning from the Homeowners Association.
Atlas pressed his warm head against my knee as I read the letter. The air conditioning hummed, a fragile shield against the 90-degree summer heat pressing against the windows. Outside, the asphalt shimmered, but inside, the room felt cold. The letter's header screamed Cypress Hills HOA in bold, all caps. Section 4.2. No animals permitted. Violation. Service dog. Fine, $500. Removal required within 72 hours. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound that made Atlas lift his ears. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I'd spent 20 years fighting for disability rights, and now the HOA was trying to evict my service animal. But they didn't know who they were messing with. The next morning, Diane Vanderlyn, HOA president, self-appointed neighborhood cop, and the human embodiment of a clogged drain, pounded on my door. Her heels clicked like tic-tacs on the driveway gravel. She wore a pastel pink blazer that clashed with her beet-red face. Her perfume, something cloying and floral, clung to the air as she thrust a printed notice at me. "Your dog is a hazard," she snapped. The board voted unanimously. Remove him or face eviction. I didn't move. Atlas stayed calm at my feet, his trained muscles tense but not reactive. "Diane," I said, my voice steady, "I need to see the official vote minutes and the specific bylaw section you're citing." She scoffed, waving a manicured hand. "We don't need minutes for this. It's obvious." "Under the Fair Housing Act," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "you must provide written documentation of the violation and your policy. I'll need it in writing." Her eyes narrowed. "You're being difficult." "I'm being a lawyer," I replied, watching her shift her weight. The gravel crunched as she turned, her heels digging into the driveway. The smell of her perfume lingered, mixing with the heat rising off the asphalt. I waited until her car vanished down the street, then grabbed my phone. The doorbell cam recorded everything, her arrival, the notice, the exchange. I replayed it, noting the timestamp, 8:17 a.m., July 12th. Then I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop. Section 4.2 said no pets, but Section 7.1 was clear. All members must comply with federal and state laws regarding service animals. The HOA's own rules protected me. I took screenshots, printed them. I also searched my email archives. Last month, Mrs. Jenkins, the same one who'd complained about Atlas, had a therapy cat approved. I found the email chain. Per ADA, therapy animals are allowed with documentation. But my service dog had full ADA certification and medical records from my neurologist. I printed those too, certificates, training logs, the neurologist's letter stating Atlas was necessary for my mobility and anxiety. Then I set up my gear. The dash cam clipped to my car's sun visor, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. In the backyard, I mounted a hidden camera behind the oak tree, its lens pointed at the fence line. The plastic casing was warm from the sun, the sensor clicking softly as it powered on. I tested the feed on my phone. Crystal clear. That night, the crunch of gravel woke me. I slipped on my robe, grabbed the hidden camera's monitor. Through the screen, I saw Diane's silhouette under the streetlight. She'd parked at the curb and was walking toward my property line, flashlight beams sweeping the yard. The air smelled of cut grass and damp earth. Crickets chirped. She stopped at the fence, peering into my backyard. "Atlas!" she called out, her voice sharp. "Come here!" But Atlas was asleep on his bed inside. I watched her fumble with the fence latch. Unlocked, of course, because she'd been here before. She stepped onto my property, her shoes sinking into the soft soil. The camera captured every detail. Her white sneakers, the mud on the soles, the way she peered under the deck. I saved the footage, labelled it HOA trespass, July 13th, 9:03 p.m. Then I sent a single email to my legal team. Initiate phase 1. Evidence chain is intact. The next morning, Diane's car was back. But this time, I was ready. I stood on my porch, holding the printed bylaws, the camera rolling. "Good morning, Diane," I said. "Care to explain why you're on my property without permission?" Her face flushed. "I was checking for violations." "You're trespassing," I said calmly, "and your violations are protected under federal law." She stammered, then turned to leave. But I kept recording. The gravel crunched under her heels again, but this time it was the sound of her losing. I closed the door, Atlas at my side. The game had just begun. The orange final notice was a gift. In legal terms, it was an escalation that demonstrated their refusal to engage in the interactive process required by the FHA. They weren't seeking to understand. They were seeking to intimidate. It was a fatal miscalculation. My weekend was spent not in fear, but in preparation. I downloaded the complete set of Oakshade Estates bylaws, covenants, and restrictions, all 87 pages of them. I printed them, 3-hole punched them, and put them in a binder. With a set of highlighters, I went to work. I wasn't just looking for Bylaw 714, the pet restriction. I was looking for the rules they were breaking. And oh, they were breaking them. Section 3.2, Nuisance. Prohibited any activity that unreasonably interferes with the quiet enjoyment of another resident's property. Bob's leaf blower performance was a textbook violation. I highlighted it in yellow turquoise. Section 5.1, Common Area Maintenance. The HOA was responsible for the upkeep and proper function of all community irrigation systems. The sprinkler aimed at my porch wasn't just harassment, it was a failure of their fiduciary duty, highlighted in pink. Section 2.4, Board Communication. All official board business was to be conducted through designated channels and documented in meeting minutes. Carol's emails from her personal account, a flagrant breach of their own protocol, highlighted in blue. The binder was becoming a beautiful, color-coded roadmap to their downfall. Meanwhile, the cameras were paying dividends. On Monday morning, my new favorite show began. At 7:02 a.m., the camera covering the common area recorded Carol walking her small, yapping terrier, a dog that, I noted with some amusement, was clearly just under the 20-pound limit. As she passed the sprinkler head nearest my property, she paused. She glanced toward my house, then bent down pretending to tie her shoe. But her hands went to the sprinkler head, a quick, deliberate twist. The camera caught the motion perfectly. At 7:03 a.m., the sprinkler switched on with the community-wide timer, and the jet of water, previously hitting the grass, was now atomizing against my living room window. I saved the clip. I labeled it Exhibit A, Sprinkler Tampering. 7:02 a.m. The harassment became a daily routine, and so did my documentation. At 8:30 a.m., a new email from Carol, this time complaining about the unsightly glare from my doorbell camera. I saved the email. At 4:15 p.m., another HOA board member, a man I'd never spoken to, let his own dog urinate on my prize-winning rose bushes right at the edge of my property line. The driveway camera caught the whole thing, including his smug little glance back at my front door. I saved the clip. Exhibit B, Property Damage. 4:15 p.m. They were so arrogant, so sure of their power, that they never once considered they were being watched. They thought they were invisible orchestrators of my misery. In reality, they were unpaid actors in a documentary about their own liability. By Wednesday, I had enough. It was time to introduce an external authority. I didn't call my own law firm, that would come later. This required a different kind of pressure. I called the county's non-emergency sheriff's line. "I need to file a report for ongoing property damage and harassment," I stated calmly. giving my address. An hour later, a deputy's cruiser pulled up. Deputy Miller was a tall, no-nonsense man with a neatly trimmed moustache and an air of professional weariness. He'd seen it all. "So," he said, clipboard in hand, "what's the problem here?" I didn't unload a frantic tirade. I invited him in and offered him a bottle of water. On my dining room table, I had my laptop ready. For the past week, I've been the target of a coordinated harassment campaign by my HOA, stemming from a refusal to accommodate my service animal, I began. It started with this. I handed him the original violation notice. He read it and grunted. HOAs. All right. Then, I continued, it escalated to this. I played the video of Bob with the leaf blower, then the clip of the other board member's dog, then the main event, the footage of Carol tampering with the sprinkler head. I showed him the time-stamped photos of the resulting muddy water stains on my siding and windows. Deputy Miller leaned forward, watching the screen. His weariness was gone, replaced by focused attention. "She adjusted it right there on camera." "She did," I confirmed. "It happens every morning. I have 5 other clips just like it." Finally, I showed him the emails from Carol's personal account. He scribbled notes, his pen scratching against the paper. When he was done, he looked up at me. The skepticism was gone. "This is a clear pattern, ma'am," he said. "You've got a fantastic record here. Best I've ever seen." He walked outside, me following at a distance. He went straight to Carol's house. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see it. Carol, arms crossed, shaking her head. Bob, red-faced, jabbing a finger in the air. Deputy Miller, impassive, just letting them talk. After 10 minutes, he returned to his cruiser, handing me a slip of paper with a case number on it. "They deny everything, of course," he said. "Said the sprinkler is malfunctioning and that you're oversensitive. But I've filed an official report documenting the harassment. If they or anyone acting on their behalf sets foot on your property again, call 911 immediately. This report establishes a history." I thanked him. As he drove away, I saw curtains twitching in windows all down the street. The board had tried to make me an outcast. Instead, I'd brought the law to their doorstep. The official report was now scanned and saved, item number 27 in the evidence folder. The quiet war of documentation was over. The public battle was about to begin. They had no idea I'd already scheduled a consultation with the best surveyor in the state and had a certified letter on its way to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The deputy's visit didn't chasten them. It enraged them. A hornet's nest doesn't calm down after you poke it with a stick. It swarms. Their petty harassment campaign mutated into a clumsy, bureaucratic assault. A new violation notice appeared, this one delivered via certified mail, a move they probably thought was the height of legal sophistication. It wasn't for radar. They knew, at least for now, that they were on thin ice there. This one was for my gardenias. Bylaw 903, landscaping. All plantings must be maintained no higher than 24 inches within 10 feet of a shared property line. My prize-winning bushes, the ones the other board member's dog had desecrated, were a full 30 inches tall. It was a classic flanking maneuver. If you can't attack the person, attack their property. I photographed the notice, filed the certified mail receipt, and then I called Mr. Abernathy. Mr. Abernathy was a surveyor with 40 years of experience and a face weathered like an old plat map. He moved with a quiet, deliberate pace that screamed precision. He arrived the next morning with a tripod, a theodolite, and a teenage assistant who carried a bag of iron pins and fluorescent orange flagging tape. The whir of his equipment was a beautiful sound. For 2 hours he worked, taking measurements that were accurate down to the millimeter. Neighbors peeked out from behind their blinds. Carol and Bob stood on their porch, arms crossed, watching the entire spectacle with undisguised hostility. At noon, Mr. Abernathy hammered a final iron pin into the ground, a deep, resonant thunk that echoed across the manicured lawns. He handed me a freshly printed survey map. "There you are, ma'am," he said, pointing with a calloused finger. "The official property line, as recorded with the county since 1988, is exactly 18 inches further into the common area than the edge of the grass indicates. He tapped the map. Those rose bushes, they're not on the line. They're 1.5 feet inside your property. And that sprinkler head they've been weaponizing? He smiled a thin, satisfied smile. It's on your land. The sprinkler head the HOA was contractually obligated to maintain was in fact my private property. They hadn't just been harassing me. They had been repeatedly trespassing and tampering with my irrigation equipment. This single piece of paper invalidated every landscaping complaint and opened up a whole new world of liability for them. The survey was scanned and became Exhibit number 28. 2 days later, the real bombshell landed. A thick envelope arrived from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It was a response to the formal complaint I had filed the week before, complete with all my video evidence and documentation. The letter was dense with legalese, but the message was unequivocal. They had reviewed my evidence and determined the allegations warranted a full investigation. An FHEO case number was assigned. The Oakshade Estates HOA was now officially on the radar of the federal government. They saw a problem homeowner. HUD saw a textbook case of disability discrimination. The monthly HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. It was always a dull affair, held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. The agenda was posted on the community bulletin board. Approval of minutes, treasurer's report, old business, new business. I spent the weekend preparing. I didn't draft a speech. I drafted a lawsuit. I assembled 12 identical packets. Each one contained a cover letter, copies of the violation notices, the police report, the certified survey map, screenshots of Carol's emails, and the letter from HUD. On the very top of each packet, I placed a crisp, professional-looking document titled Cease and Desist, a Notice of Pending Litigation. Tuesday night, I walked into the clubhouse. Radar was not with me. This wasn't his fight, it was mine, and I wanted no distractions. The room was sparsely populated with about 15 homeowners and the 5 board members seated at a long table at the front. Carol, as president, sat in the middle wielding her gavel like a scepter. She saw me walk in, and a smug smirk flickered across her face. She thought I was there to beg, to plead my case in a public forum where she held all the power. I took a seat in the back row and waited. I listened patiently through the droning treasurer's report and a tedious debate about the color of the new pool furniture. Finally, Carol banged her gavel. "All right, that brings us to new business. Does anyone have any new business to bring before the board?" Her eyes scanned the room, deliberately passing over me. This was my cue. I stood up, my briefcase in my hand. "Madam President," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the stale air. "I do." I walked to the front of the room. I didn't approach the podium. Instead, I walked down the line of the board members' table, placing a thick evidence packet squarely in front of each of them. Carol stared at the stack of papers I set before her, as if it were a venomous snake. Then I turned to the audience, and I brought copies for anyone else who might be interested in how their HOA dues are being managed. I walked along the rows of homeowners, handing a packet to every single person. The room filled with the sound of rustling paper. I returned to the front, standing before them all, and waited a beat as Carol's eyes widened, her face paling as she read the words, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. "My new business," I announced, my voice ringing with the cold, hard clarity of impending legal fact, "is this formal notice. As of this moment, the Oakshade Estates HOA and you, the board members, individually, are parties in a federal housing discrimination investigation, and that's just the beginning." A thick, stunned silence fell over the room, broken only by the rustle of 87 pages of their own bylaws being turned against them. Carol's face, which had been a mask of smug authority, was now a blotchy mess of red and white. Her gavel hand trembled. This is an ambush," she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "You are out of order. This is not on the agenda." "With all due respect, Madam President," I said, my voice level and projecting to the back wall, A federal investigation into this board's conduct is now the only agenda item that matters. A man in the front row, one of my neighbors, lowered his packet. "Page 12, he said, his voice bewildered. "Is this a police report? With your name on it, Carol?" Another homeowner chimed in from the side. "And this survey? It says the common area sprinkler is on her property. So the board has been trespassing to, what, water her windows?" The murmurs grew into a low roar of discontent. The carefully constructed facade of the board was crumbling in real time under the sickly fluorescent lights of the clubhouse. They were being audited, in public, by the very people they were supposed to serve. Bob, Carol's husband, stood up from the audience. "Now listen here. This is a private community matter. We don't need a bunch of lawyers and government agents." He was cut off by a quiet, authoritative voice from the corner of the room. A man in a crisp polo shirt with a Pinnacle Management Group logo embroidered on it slowly rose to his feet. He was Mr. Davies, our property manager, who usually just sat silently through meetings, a human embodiment of bureaucracy. "Actually, Bob, we do," Mr. Davies said, and all eyes snapped to him. He held his own copy of my evidence packet. He looked not at me, but directly at Carol and the other 4 board members. "Our firm," he began, his tone glacial, "was retained to manage the financial and operational aspects of this community, under the guidance of a board acting in good faith and in compliance with state and federal law. Our company's liability insurance, and by extension the HOA's directors and officers insurance, is predicated on that compliance." He let that sentence hang in the air. You could hear a pin drop. "I have reviewed this documentation," he continued, tapping the packet. "It includes video evidence of willful property damage, a documented pattern of targeted harassment, refusal to engage in the FHA-mandated interactive process, and now a formal investigation by the Department of Housing and Urban Development." He took a deep breath. This was the kill shot. "This goes far beyond mismanagement. This is malfeasance. Therefore, effective immediately, Pinnacle Management Group is invoking Clause 11B of our contract. We are terminating our services with Oak Shade Estates due to the board's creation of an untenable legal and financial liability. We will not be complicit in discriminatory practices. Your legal counsel will be formally notified in the morning." The room erupted. The board was being fired, in public, by their own management company. Carol looked like she had been physically struck, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. The other board members were staring at their packets, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. They were alone. The professionals had just run for the lifeboats, leaving the rogue captains to go down with the ship they'd steered directly into an iceberg. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The meeting descended into chaos, ending with a unanimous vote of no confidence. By the next morning, all 5 board members, including Carol and the dog-owning accomplice, had submitted their resignations via email. An emergency election was held the following week. My lawsuit was settled out of court less than a month later. Their insurance carrier, faced with my binder of evidence, didn't even want to risk discovery. They folded immediately. The terms were non-negotiable. First, a public, written apology posted on the community bulletin board and emailed to every resident. Second, the HOA had to pay for a full replacement of my sod and professionally clean the water stains from my home's exterior. Third, all current and future board members were required to attend annual FHA compliance training, paid for out of the personal settlement from the former board members, not from HOA funds. And finally, a check was cut for a sum that was, let's just say, substantial. I endorsed it over to a non-profit that trains and provides service animals to veterans. Radar's work had helped fund a dozen more just like him. It's quiet now. The sprinklers in the common area, and on my property, work perfectly, watering only the grass. My gardenias are thriving. The new HOA president, a retired engineer who believes in rules, but also in basic decency, sometimes stops to chat when I'm out walking Radar. He always gives him a friendly pat. They thought my service dog was a threat to their community. They were wrong. He was a catalyst. He revealed that the real threat wasn't a 70-pound retriever. It was a handful of people who mistook a little power for a license to bully. They learned that a community isn't built on bylaws and violations, but on respect and the willingness to listen. And I was reminded that the best way to fight a war of intimidation is with a calm strategy and an ironclad paper trail. They wanted to remove my dog from the premises. Instead, they got themselves removed from power.